Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today on a Saturday evening. And I am Supriya, your study abroad expert from iSchoolConnect. And a warm welcome to everyone. Today we're going to be talking about how we Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today on a Saturday evening. And sorry. So today we're going to be talking about how we can apply with ease at US universities, the applications, SOPs and interviews. And a very warm welcome to Hannah today. She is with us from Franklin and Marshall College. She's the Associate Director of International Admissions. Thank you so much for taking out time and joining us today, Hannah. We're really looking forward to the session. To give you a little overview of how today's session is going to be structured, first we're going to be talking about the statistics of Indians studying abroad. What does a typical study abroad roadmap look like? Applying to schools in the US, the do's and don'ts for SOPs, tips for interviews about Franklin and Marshall College, and the admission hacks to get into that college. And of course, we will have a live Q&A session after that. So please stay till the end and put in your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to take that. So quickly moving forward, through this chart, we evidently see that USA is the most preferred destination by study abroad aspirants, followed by Australia and Canada at the second and third position. And so let's do a quick poll. Which country would you like to study in? I mean, I'm sure everybody is here for US for this webinar, but let's just see if there's somebody even preferring other countries. Just a minute, I don't see the Q&A box here. I am having some trouble looking at my Q&A section and the answers, but definitely we look at this in some time. And so here is a typical study abroad roadmap. Of course, it starts 12 months in advance, and it begins with researching about schools, preparing scores, collating mark sheets, then beginning with university applications, and then it goes to applying for scholarships, then drafting the resume, LOR, essays, paying applications fees, monitoring the applications, and applying for student loan, preparing for the visa, and then it's time to leave. So there is booking flight tickets, and then it's get set go. So it'll be really nice to understand what stage everybody's here at. You can put in these answers in the chat box. We can take the Q&A section towards the end. So of course, there would be people from different stages they would be at currently. We hope you're at the deciding university phase. So it's a good time for you to understand more about Franklin and Marshall as well. So yes, I see some answers coming in. Yes, I think US is the most preferred, and most of you are still at the application stage. Now I will request Hannah to take over and give her insightful guidance on how it really works in the US.
Thank you. So yeah, one more time, my name is Hannah Kim. I work for Franklin and Marshall College. So I'm going to start just by giving a very general overview of how admissions in the US works compared to other countries, including places like Canada, including places like the UK and other parts of Europe. Because in the United States, we do things a little bit differently in the fact that it's a very, what we refer to as like a holistic process. So we're looking at more than just your grades and your test scores. Those are of course important, but we really want to get to know who a student is in a very well-rounded way. And so I'll start by talking about degree selection. This is one of the biggest differences between a lot of schools in the US and a lot of schools in other countries when you're applying. It's great if you already know exactly what degree you want to do. It's great if you know exactly what job field you want to go into, what job you want to have. But not everyone does. And so we're a little bit more flexible when you apply to the US in terms of applying to a specific degree. A lot of times students will come in thinking they want to do one thing, and then maybe they change their mind. Maybe they end up doing two things instead of just one thing, and they can pick up a second major. Maybe they have no clue. So a lot of students will even come in undecided. So knowing the degree ahead of time, it's not as important in the United States for a lot of reasons. Part of that is when you take college or university courses, you're not only taking courses within that degree specifically. We actually encourage students to take a lot of what some schools will call like general requirement courses or general education classes. And so you're going to be taking classes across different disciplines anyways, until you kind of pick and choose and fine tune exactly what major you want to do. So taking a step back from the application perspective, you don't always have to apply to get into a specific degree program. Now, sometimes you do, but it's not a big deal if you don't know exactly the degree that you want, if you don't know exactly the job that you want to go into. So that's kind of the first biggest difference, is the specificity of the degree that you're looking for. We kind of encourage you to kind of explore different options. So that's number one. Number two, as part of this holistic review that I referred to, we look at, like I said, more than just your grades and test scores. So I would refer to those as the kind of quantitative skills or hard skills, things that you're learning in an academic setting. We're also looking at qualitative skills or soft skills. So these are things like leadership skills, for example. These are things like your, clubs and organizations, your ability to like work well with others, all of these kind of skills outside of the classroom that show who you are as a person, your ability to lead and be a global citizen, for example. Those are also important skills in the United States. So getting a really good score on your exams is very important, but it's not the most important thing. So that holistic review from, most colleges in the United States, what we're really looking at is your transcripts, of course, but we're also looking at your personal statement, which we'll get into, your essays. We're looking at, any additional qualitative information. Like I said, club and organization participation, all of that is really important in addition to those hard skills. I will also say really quickly, because I saw something in the chat, I am speaking purely from the undergraduate perspective right now. However, even at the graduate level, I will say these skills continue to be important. Things like interviews and essays continue to be important at the graduate level, but I am speaking specifically about undergraduate studies specifically right now. So part of that specificity is things like early decision, early action, and regular decision. So you may already be familiar with these terms, but you may not. And again, in the United States versus places like the UK, something like early decision actually means something a little bit different. So in the United States, early decision specifically is a binding agreement. So you can only choose one place, one school in the whole country to apply early decision to. Not early action, but specifically early decision. So because it's a binding agreement, you have to sign off on it. Your parents have to sign off on it. Your counselor has to sign off on it, saying that if you are admitted to that school, that you are promising you will go there. That's why it's binding. For that reason, if you decide to apply early decision somewhere, it does typically give you a little bit of an edge in the admissions process, because it tells students, or it tells the admissions representatives that this student is very serious about this being the right fit school for them, that you can really see yourself there and you believe that this is the right place for you. So we take it very seriously. That's why you can only pick one, and why so many people have to sign off on that when you decide to apply early decision. Now, early action is something where, again, it gives you a little bit of an edge because it means you're applying sooner rather than later. So you're not waiting until the final deadline to apply, but it is not binding. So that is the biggest difference between the two. A lot of times, if you have things like financial aid as a consideration, schools will encourage you to apply early action if there's limited funding that could run out by the time you apply for something like regular decision. But again, every school is a little bit different. And then of course, regular decision is just the standard option. When you're applying to a lot of schools, which we know students are applying to more and more schools every year, it's completely understandable that the majority of those will be regular decisions. So that's just the final round. And it doesn't mean that it's not a school that is still important to you. You know, you want to kind of narrow down your list and make sure that you can see yourself attending any of the schools that you apply to. But that is, of course, what the kind of majority option would be. So finally, do your research. I'll also say really quickly that everything I just said could be not true for lots of different schools in the United States, because every school is different. So that's why it's really important to do your research. You know, I can speak in generalizations. I can speak about my school specifically, but it could be that every school has a different process for how they do things. There's a lot of different types of schools in the United States. So there's liberal arts schools, there's research institutions, there's public schools, and they large schools, small schools, they all operate differently, community colleges. And so knowing the school that you're applying to and how they differ in not only the academic experience, but also the admissions process is going to be extremely, extremely important. And then of course, for graduate school and undergrad as well. So you can go to the next slide then. So do's and don'ts for SOPs. So specifically in the United States, we do refer to this as a personal statement. And again, that terminology is kind of specific for a reason. So a statement of purpose in a lot of countries could be you saying why you think you're appropriate for the major or program that you're applying into, okay? But like I just said, because that's not always the most important thing in the United States, a personal statement is just that. It is something that is personal to you. It is your story. So it's not just talking about the degree that you want to do and why you think you would be good for that program at that school you're applying to, but it's a statement of your story, your background, who you are as a person, all of those soft skills that I talked about that will make you a good fit for our campus community. So in the United States, most schools are more than just a place where you're going to be going and participating in classes. It's a whole campus community where you're expected, honestly, to participate and encouraged to participate in all types of clubs and organizations and experiential learning, things like research opportunities, jobs, study abroad, internships, lots of different ways that you can get involved. And so when we're reading as admissions officers, personal statements, we're reading them from that perspective of, is this person going to take advantage of all of the opportunities that we have on campus here? So it's more than just, I think I would be good for this academic program, but I think I would be good for this community specifically. So admissions representatives, we use the essay to distinguish you from other applicants as well. So we read hundreds, thousands of applications in just a couple of months. And it can be very repetitive often. So we are looking for something that helps us remember you, remember who you are as a person. It does not need to mean that you, have solved world hunger, for example. It does not mean to be like you are the only person in the world that has had this experience, but it needs to be something more memorable than just repeating a list of things you've been involved in or your resume, your activities. So for example, having a personal statement essay that's about being the captain of a team, maybe like a sports team, that's probably not very memorable to me because lots of people are involved in sports, and that's just listing something that you could put on your activities. But if as captain of the team, you use that opportunity to hold a fundraiser, and you did something specific like that, that's memorable. That's something that's taking a part of who you are and your personal experience and showing me why it was important and how you're going to be involved in our campus in similar ways. So stay positive, even if the essay topic is about something negative. We get a lot of essays about a lot of things, really hard times that people have gone through, loss even. Obviously during COVID specifically, there have been a lot of struggles with a lot of students, and it's absolutely okay to talk about those in your essays. But then try to turn it positive, right? So even if it's about something negative, show me where the light is. Show me, how you've learned from that experience, for example. And it's very important to remain authentic. So don't write about what you think we want to hear. It's really important that you are, speaking from your heart, and that includes things like, grammar, for example. We are not sitting there with a red pen, like double checking your grammar, making sure you're spelling things correctly. We're not doing that. That's really not the intention behind this essay. It's really not even checking for English proficiency or anything like that. It's really just meant to hear your story. So don't worry if you have some small mistakes. I would rather you have those mistakes if it was written authentically by you than to, have you plagiarize or something like that. We certainly don't want that. So just be authentic and it'll definitely show through. So you can go to the next slide then. So interviews are very important, especially if we do have any people here who are interested in graduate studies. Again, I don't work with graduate students, so I can't speak to it too much, but the graduate school process specifically puts a heavy emphasis on the interview portion. So this is something that you really want to do well and prepare well for. But even at the undergraduate level, interviews are a very important tool because, as I've been saying, we're trying to get this holistic picture of who you are as a student. And one of the best ways for us to do that is to just have a casual conversation with you. They're not meant to really be high pressure. They're not meant to be like a job interview. We're not asking you trick questions or anything like that, trying to slip you up. It's really just a way for us to get to know you better, just like the personal statement is. So a couple of suggestions that I have when going into any interview, and I do mean any interview, even a job interview, for example, do your research. That's extremely important. So just because you are applying to 10 schools, for example, doesn't mean all 10 schools are the same. And when you're doing the interview, you're not just talking about yourself, but you're talking about yourself in the context of the schools you're applying to. So do your research about what programs we do offer, what opportunities we have. It's really great even if you can reference specific professors. I've had students do that in interviews. That's really awesome if you're able to do that. Just something that shows that you have an understanding of the person that you're talking to and communicating with. Elaborate, that's very important. Make sure that you're talking a lot, right? It's not the intention for us to sit there and talk a lot. Obviously, we'll also give you information, but we really want to give you the chance to brag about yourself. Tell us as much as possible about your accomplishments and who you are and why you think you would be a good fit. And then a lot of the other stuff like being genuine, that kind of carries over from all the other things I've talked about as well. And then very important, just really quickly, bring questions. Don't forget that. So, you asking questions at the end or throughout is also extremely important. So don't forget to bring a list of questions with you. But yeah, you can go on now. Okay, so as I said, I am from Franklin and Marshall College. So as I indicated, we have a lot of different types of schools in the United States. We are specifically a liberal arts school. So undergraduate programs only is what we offer. We're a baccalaureate college and we're a small school. So average class size is going to be not a 300 student lecture class, which you may very well find at a lot of schools in the United States. But here specifically, it's going to be like 17 students or less. You'll probably never have a class bigger than like 30 students. But that means you're going to have really good relationships with your professors at a place like F&M. So small student to faculty ratio, you're going to have good access to them. We do offer 62 different fields of study, but at a liberal arts school, those majors tend to be a little bit more broad because we give you a lot of flexibility to kind of customize what you want to do and what electives you want to take within those majors. So we're not going to have something as specific as like, like aerospace engineering, but we do have an astrophysics program. So just kind of more umbrella options that you can participate in. And everything is very discussion based. It's very hands-on. Like I said, you're not just going to be a name in the back of the class. It's really something that you're actively participating in a place like F&M. You can go to the next slide then. So about 2,200 students on our campus. Like I said, a small campus. We are a selective school. We're actually a top 40 liberal arts school in the country. So we do have an admissions rate around 35%, I believe. But we do have a very, very global population here. So we actually have one of the highest enrollments of international students among all baccalaureate colleges in the entire United States. So about 50 different countries are represented and about 19 to 20% of our total student population are international students specifically.
That's really interesting, yes.
Yeah. And people are often surprised to hear that, I think, because, where we're located in a small city in Pennsylvania, people typically think of like the New Yorks or the Washington, D.C.s or Los Angeles, like the UC schools. But for us, it's something that we really pride ourselves in having the resources and the facilities to really welcome students from all different backgrounds. So that if you come here, you're getting an exposure to a lot of different backgrounds and cultures, and it's just going to make the transition to the United States a lot easier because of that. So that's definitely something that's important. And that, go ahead.
Yes. I was just saying that it's really important, and it's great that you mentioned it specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's something we mentioned for not only our international students, but our US students too, because it's a benefit for them as much as it's a benefit for our international students. Everyone benefits when you have a very diverse global population. So all of that kind of global mission is built into everything our students do. So all of the courses are taught from that perspective, but we also have a very high percentage of study abroad, for example. We also have a lot of language options. So if you're interested in like majoring or minoring, we have lots of different things that you can major and minor in terms of different like cultural and language perspectives too. Yeah, it's a really special place to be, like I said, for all students, not just international. And I'll just also say, you can say on this page, but knowing that you're knowing that kind of background about the school, that's part of the research you should be doing. So when you're researching, you're not just researching a school for the academic programs, although that's important, but you're also researching a school for the type of experience you are going to have there as an international student, because it's not true that every school is going to have 17 students per class. It's not true that every school is going to have 50 different countries represented. So knowing that your experience is going to be, appreciated there is part of the research that you should be doing too. So specifically at F&M, a lot of what I've said so far really does apply to F&M as well. So we have a very holistic approach to our education here. So again, you don't need to apply to get into a program specifically at F&M. As a liberal arts school, we particularly appreciate when our students have a well-rounded experience with courses across lots of different disciplines. And so we don't even make our students declare a major until their second year on campus. So we give you the whole first year and a half to really explore, try different things. And so for that reason, as the admissions process, if you're interested in like computer science, for example, which is something that we have, you don't need to apply to get into that program. In other words, you're not competing with other students for a spot in that program. We can admit as many students that are interested in any program as we want. We don't have like a specific number or a quota that we're reaching. So that makes it a lot easier for you guys, because we as admissions representatives don't need to worry about only filling a certain number of spaces. So that's number one. Number two, we're looking at all those same soft skills. So things like, your activities are really important. Your personal statement obviously is really important. And again, we want it from that perspective of like who you are as a student. A lot of other schools, I forgot to mention, do have supplemental essays that they require for an application as well on top of the personal statement. We don't specifically require supplemental essays, but we do encourage students to send us any additional information that they want. So something like a portfolio is not required, but it is strongly, or not strongly encouraged, but it is an option that you're allowed to do. If you want to send us additional essays, that's fine. We'll read everything that you give us because we're just trying to get a complete picture of who you are. I've mentioned leadership skills several times already, and I will re-emphasize that leadership skills are really something that our campus specifically, we really find value in that. That's something that if you have leadership skills, we know you're going to be a leader on our campus community. And to be honest, a lot, if not most of our international students specifically that come in do truly end up becoming leaders on campus, those students specifically. So that's something that I'm definitely looking for when I'm reading an application. Now, we do also offer interviews. They are what we refer to as not required, but strongly encouraged, because, and like I've been saying, an interview almost never hurts you. It always helps you. So we see them in a very casual way. They are all virtual, so very accessible. But we do even offer 3 different types of interviews. And this is something that's a little bit unique to F&M. So you can choose from whichever one you think will be the most comfortable or the right fit for you. You can interview with a member of our admissions staff. So we have staff that are trained full-time. That's what they do. They interview students. Then we also have current international students specifically that work in our admissions office. So again, they're current students, they're paid, so they're also trained. So they are still formal interviews, but I think that this is a really great way for you as an international student to learn about what it's like being an international student firsthand from a student that is on campus. So they'll be the best resource for you to kind of learn about the types of resources and support that we give to international students specifically. And because time zones, of course, are a thing. They also typically have the most availability for different time zones because they're students that can kind of, do interviews late at night, for example, after they're done studying versus the staff who have a very strict like 9 to 5 kind of schedule. And then finally, we just started offering alumni interviews as well. So if you want to hear from an alum, it might not be specifically an international alum, but someone who has graduated from F&M and is able to speak about, the types of opportunities they've had since graduating with an F&M degree, then an alumni might be the right choice for you as well. And again, these are meant to be casual, they're meant to be conversational. We are trying to tailor our information about F&M as much as we're trying to get information from you. So we tell students, like, don't stress. Yes, come prepared. Do your research, know that F&M is a liberal arts school, for example, know that we only offer 62 different programs and it might not be every program in the world, and come with a list of questions. But as long as you're being authentic and you're asking questions and you're engaged and you're talking, right, that's the most important thing, then there's really no stress behind it, or there shouldn't be anyways.
It's really important to be conversational and not be scared in the interview and look like we're being like interviewed for a job, for example. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think there's often this kind of misconception probably around like movies in the US where we think of admissions officers as being these like 80-year-old men in like tweed suits, like all sitting around with like a red pen marking, essays and stuff like that. But honestly, like it wasn't that long ago that a lot of us were students. Our average admissions representative is probably closer to 30 than they are to 80, certainly. So, we have been there. We've been in your shoes. We're very empathetic to what you guys are going through. And so we're just trying to help you find the right fit for you. And not every student is the right fit for every school, but it's all a learning process and trying to figure out, what is the right option for you specifically. That you can go on. So finally, this is just something that I like to kind of talk about, knowing the value of your degree. So I always encourage students to look at outcomes specifically when you're researching a school. This is especially important for things like, graduate school as well, but knowing that your degree is going to be worth something across any field, but specifically the field you're maybe looking at going into. So F&M does have, it's actually higher than this now. I believe it's around a 96% landing rate in graduate school or job placement within 6 months of graduating. So knowing that you're not going to be sitting around a year after graduating, still trying to look for what the next step is, but that we do a very good job of placing students in graduate programs all over the world is something that's very important. Seeing like the graduation rate, those are types of things you should be researching as well. We do have a good number of students who go, it says law school and medical school here specifically, but honestly, that number is the same across all of the programs. So we just have a very, very good, what we refer to as our Office of Student and Postgraduate Development. So advisors who work with students very early on to be placed in things like, graduate school, law school, wherever they want to go after they graduate. So the starting median salary is around $61,000. This is very high compared to what a lot of schools are in the United States. And our mid-career median salary is around 130,000. That is certainly higher than what a lot of schools will produce. And of course, it depends on the field that you're going into. Every career is different. If you're going into tech, it's probably not going to pay the same as if you're going into a nonprofit industry. But all of this to say is that this is something that we do very well. So I always encourage students to remember to look up and research outcome information about the school they're applying to, because they might have the right program, but if you want to go to law school and only 10% of students that have graduated from that school to go into law school have actually gotten into law school, that's something of note. I'm being a little bit exaggerated there, but it's definitely something that you want to research ahead of time too.
Yeah, I think these numbers are great. I mean, especially the salaries, and that's good motivation for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, that's basically the end of my formal presentation. So I am happy to start answering some questions. It looks like we do have a lot here, so I may need to back up a little bit.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions, and that's great that our audience has been engaged and they have questions from their end. So yes, Hannah, we can go and you can choose a question of what you'd like to answer first. And students, feel free to add in more questions. We have a lot of time for Q&A today, so it will really help you resolve any doubts that you might have in your head.
Yes. Okay, yeah, so I'm looking at the Q&A and I might just go down the list. So someone here said that they are going to get a bachelor's in journalism. So they will have 15 years of education. I came across the US requires at least 16 years of education. I see. So is it possible to pursue a master's? Yeah, so as long as you have a bachelor's degree in the United States, there isn't a specific number of years that you have to have been in school in order to go on to get a master's degree at the graduate level. As long as you have completed a bachelor's degree, no matter the number of years, typically you can go into any master's program. So that should not be a problem there. Yeah, and visual communications, for example. Yeah, so that is like certainly not an issue. We have students, and that's not true. That's not just true at the graduate level, but also at the undergraduate level too. We have students who graduate early. Students who complete high school a year early, for example. Students who complete a bachelor's degree early, and the reason behind that is varying. But as long as you have the degree completed at the level below it, you should typically be okay. So that would be something that I would just double check with any admissions officer at any school you're applying to, but that is typically how I think it would work across the board. So that's a great question.
In India, some of the bachelor's degree programs are 3 years. So we complete about 15 years education. So, we've heard that a lot, that, US institutes ask for 16 years of education before getting into master's. So that is a big doubt actually in most of the students.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I'm thinking of like the UK, for example, is also only 3 years for undergraduates. There's plenty of schools in across the world where you get a bachelor's degree in only 3 years. Now, things in professional degrees in the United States, so let's say like becoming a doctor, going to medical school, that's a little bit different typically. Let's say, there's a lot of countries where you can complete a medical degree at the undergraduate level, just go straight through. It's more than 3 years, obviously, it's typically more than 4 years, but in the United States, you cannot do that. You have to complete a bachelor's degree and then apply separately to medical school or law school, anything that has a professional degree attached to it. And And so for that reason, it could be that the degree abroad doesn't translate over. But that's why I would double check with most programs. Because again, I can imagine that we have a lot of international students that are coming from overseas, like places in India, like places in the UK, that have only completed the 3 years of their bachelor's degree. And it typically wouldn't be a problem, but it could depend on the program that you're going into as
Yes. I think that's a great tip to check upon each university's requirement before worrying about having only a 3-year degree bachelor program. Yes, that's
absolutely. Yeah. So then I have another question here. Is the qualification in the National Olympiad in Physics and Informatics considered an extracurricular activity? So yeah, I get a lot of students who talk about participation in the Olympiads. That's certainly something that it's additional to whatever classes you're taking. So it's extracurricular, right? It doesn't need to be something that's specifically like sports or club related for it to be considered extracurricular. We just want to see that students are taking advantage of opportunities that are not required of them. So things that are optional, things that are outside of just sitting in classes, going home and doing your homework, sitting for exams, that's all important, but anything outside of that you're taking advantage of will be important as well. So yes, I certainly get a lot of students who will put that information on their extracurricular or, on Common App specifically. When you apply through the United States, there's a whole list you can put of different activities that you've participated in. Great question. So I'm a graduate in medical laboratory technologist, and I would like to do an after-graduate program in healthcare management. Is that possible? So this is not something that I can speak specifically to, and I can say this is definitely going to be dependent on the school that you're looking into. So this is probably not something that has a universal answer across the United States. So I would definitely start researching programs in healthcare management specifically that are offered, and then reach out to any admissions officer at that school and explain your background and situation. And they would be able to guide you either towards the process for their own school, or we love giving suggestions for other schools that have programs that we don't have. We're really good about that. We're not trying to compete with other schools. If there's a school, like if I'm at a college fair and there's a school that has a program that I don't have, and I know a student is interested in that, I will send them over their way. So we're really good about just helping you find the right fit for you. So that's why I would recommend reaching out to an admissions officer.
That's very nice, actually. It's because keeping the students' interest in mind at all times. Also, students, I would just like to add one thing. Whatever queries you have, you can email us. I'll just put in our email address, because our counselors are almost in touch with a lot of university admissions team, and they might help you with some queries which you may have even after this call. So feel free to reach out to us, and our counselors would be able to give you an idea from a point of view of different colleges as well.
Great. So I have one here that says, I'm in class 12. I want to go to the US in September intake, but I haven't applied for SAT. What should I do to go to the US in September intake? This is a great question. More and more schools in the United States have gone test optional, meaning that SATs and ACTs are not required. Now, this is one of those things where every school is different. So even schools that are test optional will say they're still required for international students, or they'll say they're still highly recommended, even though they're test optional. Every school works a little bit differently, but I think COVID specifically has seen these changes where more and more schools in the US are moving away from requiring these, because especially during COVID, access to sit for these tests was challenging, logistically challenging. However, it was kind of coming at the tail end of a general trend we're seeing in the United States before COVID even, where more schools were going test optional, because standardized tests are just one part of who you can be as a student, your abilities to succeed as a student. Quite honestly, there are just some students who don't test well, who just don't have that type of learning experience, and that's okay. There are some students who don't have the access to resources like a lot of you do with using iSchoolConnect, for example. Not every student in the world has access to these types of advising and counselors to help them prepare that, would lead them to do well on an SAT test. So at F&M specifically, we've actually been test optional for over 30 years. So that's not a COVID thing for us. It's not something that's going to change anytime soon. So if you're able to submit SATs, great, that's awesome, especially if you do really well on them. However, we truly are test optional in that it's still not required for international students. And it really, really genuinely does not make a difference to us if you do not submit them. It's just, we have a lot of other things that we can look at in their place, and that's totally fine. So research schools that are test optional if you truly cannot sit for any SATs. But if you're able to and you do well, like I said, I encourage you to submit them too. So is 15 years of education mandatory, right? Same question here. Definitely important. Just research the different schools and see what they say. I'm a high school graduate from Ghana, interested in pursuing an undergraduate program. Is there an age limit for foundation or an undergraduate student since I am 32 years now? This is a really great question. And it depends on the school. I would say there are definitely programs in the United States that will allow students of any age. It might not be every school in the United States, but there are definitely a lot of options to choose from, both at the bachelor's undergraduate level, especially at the associates, like 2-year community college level. But there are a lot of undergraduate programs that provide this opportunity regardless of your age. So again, this is where research comes in, and it's important to reach out and just find out what different colleges suggest, what different counselors or admissions representatives suggest as well. But I promise you, you will not have trouble finding something that is the right fit for you there. That won't be a problem. Okay, so interested in apply for a political science major for undergraduate degree, and I'm still studying in 12th. When do I need to plan for it? I see. Okay. So this might be a question for your iSchoolConnect counselor, honestly. So this is something that I think they'll be able to help you with finding the right timeline for you of when you should start looking for schools, when you should start applying, things like that.
Yes, Khushi, please write to us. I have sent our email ID, and we will definitely be able to help you. We have a lot of counselors and advisors who would just help you with the right, choose the right college and help you with the application. So please write to us and connect with us.
Okay, financial aid. This is such an important question. I was hoping that someone would, talk about it, because I didn't want to go into too much detail if there weren't questions about it. But honestly, there's probably always questions about this. So this is something that's so important that if you require financial aid, you research what the different schools' policies are. Because again, every school is different. There are a lot of schools in the United States that do provide financial aid for non-US citizens, but there are a lot of schools that do not. And I don't want students ever to be kind of caught off guard thinking that if they apply to a school and not realizing that the tuition could be $60,000 a year or something like that, and they do not provide financial aid, that's where finding the right fit, that's what we mean when we say that. So for Franklin and Marshall specifically, which I can speak to, we are very, very lucky in that we not only provide financial aid for our international students, but we are actually one of the few schools in the country that meets 100% of determined need for all students, US citizens, and international students. So what that means is when you apply to us, you basically fill a form, either your CSS profile or we have our own institutional form, and that will determine how much your family can afford. So it's need-based aid, and that's all you pay. right? So that's what we mean when we say 100%, we meet 100%. So you only pay what you can afford towards the total cost of attendance, and then we make up the difference for you. That doesn't just include tuition, but our financial aid packages also include things like room and board. It has a guaranteed on-campus job, so campus employment for our students. It also provides things like textbook vouchers. Medical insurance is covered. That's something students often forget about, is medical insurance in the United States. So we cover medical insurance as well. So the only thing that our financial aid packages do not take into consideration are visa fees and flights to and from the United States. So those would have to be covered by you. But we are very lucky in that we are able to operate in this way. The only thing I will say is if you do need full aid covered, like 100% of your tuition needs to be covered, we still do admit students every single year that we give full tuition to. However, the admissions process does become a little bit more competitive if you need everything covered. So that's something I would keep in mind, especially when you're thinking about early decision applications versus regular decision applications.
Yeah, I think this is really great. Again, F&M keeping the students' interest in mind and their passion to pursue their studies irrespective of their backgrounds. So that's really nice again.
Yeah, definitely important. Okay, so we have a question about some, okay. So it looks like we have a question about some like sports, for example, and the participation in that. That's definitely something that I would recommend reaching out about. Can I get directly a job in that field afterwards? So everything in terms of like job opportunities, like opportunities when you're on campus, all of that is going to be specific to the school. So I would reach out, see, the alumni network is always really great to reach out to for a school, but in terms of the types of jobs you're able to get in the United States, I recommend, specifically reaching out to any school to see if that's something that they're familiar with. We, for example, have a wonderful international student services office, and they keep in contact with our international students before they get to campus, the whole time they're on campus, all 4 years, and then even after they graduate. So we keep in touch with them. They make sure that they know exactly what's going on with you guys, what jobs you've gone into, so that we have a really strong alumni network for things like those opportunities too. And then a question here about pursuing biology and getting into a medical program. Can I give my entrance exams after my boards, or will it affect my resume for giving it late? So I don't think it's ever a problem to give anything late up until the deadline. So when you apply to schools in the United States, you don't, and again, this is school specific, but you don't always need to have your final exam grades, because a lot of students will apply before those come out. That's typically okay. It could be different for different schools. But the most important thing is that they're done and complete by the time you start school here. So as long as you have all of your exams completed and are able to, submit what you have already up until that point when you apply, and then submit them before you actually start classes on campus, it's typically okay. But that's one of those ones that will be school dependent too. 7 or 8 months time for preparing for undergraduate after the 12th grade is good. Again, these are definitely good questions for your iSchoolConnect consultant as well. Okay. Graduate programs, post-study permit. Great question. So this is a really great question. So this isn't just for graduate programs, I believe, although, like I said, I don't work with graduate students. So I'll speak about for undergraduate students, and then I can tell you that I'm pretty sure it extrapolates to graduate students as well. But there's something called OPT in the United States. So OPT allows students to remain on a student visa, so an F1 student visa in the United States, and continue for either 1 or 3 years. in a job that's in the field of study that they have just graduated in. Okay, so that's very important. If you get a biology degree, you have to go into the field of biology in order for your OPT to count. But basically, the school that is sponsoring you on your OPT will basically, sign off. It's a government regulation, so it's not something that we designate, but it's something that we sign off on for the government. And it's typically 1 year unless you're going into a STEM field specifically. So this might be why you're seeing different numbers. It's 3 years. We call it the 3-year STEM extension if you are going into a STEM field. So that allows you to remain on your student visa for 3 additional years to stay in the United States and work under that visa in something called OPT. Now, there's a lot of different immigration and work visa rules in the United States. So there could be additional opportunities available to graduate students specifically that I don't know about. There are such things as H-1B visas, which are just work visas in the United States. So there's a lot of different rules and regulations that revolve around visa stuff. I'm not a DSO. That is something that every school has, though. A DSO is responsible for educating you on visa regulations. So there will be someone that can help you understand that. I'm just unfortunately not that person, but OPT is something that's available for students when they graduate. Great question.
So in the interest of time, maybe we can take up one last question.
Okay, great. So I see more about financial aid here. Yeah, so this is a great one, like tips for extracurricular activities. So something that I like to do or say is I would rather see you committed to a couple of things that you've been doing for like a long period of time, rather than trying to pack your resume with 100 things that you all have been doing just for like 1 month, or that you all started in just your final year of school. That to me doesn't look like you're actually passionate about and committed to the activities that you're putting on your activity list. It tells me that you're just trying to pack your resume and make it look better. So that's where being authentic and genuine is really important. We want to see things that are showing your personality. And that means put things on your list that you actually care about, things that you've been passionate about. You know, even if you're not a music major, if you're interested, if you play an instrument or you like to sing, you can put that. If you've been singing for 5 years, in like chorus or something like that, put that on your resume. It doesn't need to be relevant to the major that you want to go into. It just needs to show that you have passion for something. I had the question about like Olympiads earlier. Again, anything that you're taking advantage of outside of the classroom is going to look really great. Anything that shows leadership skills. If you've started your own club, I love seeing those. If you've like taken that initiative, that's always really fantastic. But just make sure that you have a commitment and passion to like a handful of activities rather than 50 that are all kind of disconnected and maybe you just put on there because you think it looks better or something like that. That would be my recommendation when it comes to extracurricular activities.
I think that's a great answer. I mean, really, it's great because that also shows the person's passion, right? And not just trying to get into like look good on the resume. That's a great answer.
Right, absolutely.
So yes, I think we've come to the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much, Hannah. It was a great session and very insightful. Thank you so much, students, for being a part of this and again, taking out time on a Saturday evening. So here is our contact details. Feel free to reach out to us for any more questions and we will be happy to assist you. And good luck to everyone and happy weekend. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you so much.